Good evening good evening to Salam Media audience and viewers at home, and good evening to all Africa for Palestine audience. Welcome to another episode in our webinar series. Today we will be discussing with Catherine about taking a stand against Morocco's occupation of Western Sahara. This particular session is being streamed live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube as well, all Salam Media pages. If you can also check on the Africa for Palestine Facebook page, it is being streamed live there. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone not to miss out. We are starting now. Like I said, welcome everybody. And today we have Catherine. Catherine, how are you?
I'm very good. I'm so honored to be here with you. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to the wonderful Africa for Palestine audience that's joining us tonight. It's very special for me to do this with you.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. So the introduction that we always make is that Africa for Palestine, who we are, we explain ourselves. We are a South African-based human rights organization that's doing work in Africa. Particularly, our goals are to spread Palestine awareness, solidarity in the continent, and to push out Israeli influence in the continent. We work with different organizations, particularly civil society organizations, governments, political parties, trade union movements all over the continent that identify with our cause. Of course, our work is not only limited to Palestine, but to other areas in the world of oppression, because we know, like Karl Marx said, workers of the world, we say oppressed people of the world, unite, you've got nothing to lose but your chains. We do a number of workers on Swaziland, on Venezuela, on Western Sahara, like today in the Basque area. So we do a number of work on international solidarity. And some of these webinars have been focusing on those particular issues, from academics to people in the religious sector, your activists, your students, and so on. They've been coming on this particular platform to speak about their activism. Without any further ado, Catherine, to people who are joining our webinar series, and we do this traditionally, who's Catherine? Who are you, so that the audience and the viewers can be familiar with you?
So Catherine is a human rights defender, a proud South African, a nation builder, and climate activist. I spend all of my time on the ground, working really hard to make sure that here in South Africa, we're building bridges, we're dealing with the issues of our society. And when I'm outside of the country, I'm working on the issue of Western Sahara. I am, I was saying to you earlier, the Sahrawi people are my people. I've worked so closely and so intimately with the Sahrawi people for so many years that this has become personal. And so it's not something that I do, it is my life. And my work as a climate activist, especially being a South African, is so important, because I think these are two forgotten issues. Even climate change, even here in our country. I've seen how climate has impacted our people, our communities, our rural communities, and it's important that we constantly work at highlighting and reminding people about the topics that are really unsexy, unconventional, the topics that we like to forget, and the topics that are only given prevalence and dominance on days of importance. What about the other days in between that calendar year? And so I spend my time working on social justice issues throughout South Africa, and Western Sahara is that thing that's just really special for me. It's a purpose and it's a calling, and yeah, and it's a pleasure to engage with organizations such as yourself.
Oh, great. One of the things that we really preach for in Africa of Palestine is bringing sexy back into activism.
Exactly.
Not everybody who's an activist is boring. It's all the professor in university. Catherine is an example of young people and who are active in the social justice spectrum. Catherine, tell us, to the layman, to our audience sitting at home, to the normal South African, to the normal Malawian, to the normal person sitting at home or their workplace or school listening to this particular webinar series episode, what is happening in Western Sahara?
Thank you for that as a starting point, because I think let us go back to the beginning. Firstly, Western Sahara is a country in North Africa. It is directly south of Morocco, directly north of Mauritania. So as you can understand, it is wedged right between these two countries. And Western Sahara is a country that is very rich in mineral resource. Since 1975, it has been illegally military occupied by Morocco. Prior to 1975, it was colonized by Spain. And in 1975, when Spain left, Morocco moved in from the north and Mauritania from the south, taking over occupation of Western Sahara. It forced an armed conflict which then ran from 1975 to 1991. This armed conflict saw Sahrawis engage in an armed conflict. It saw the only way out for women and children was a border in southwest Algeria, and many Sahrawis fled into southwest Algeria, where a temporary refugee camp was set up. 45 years later, those people are still living in a temporary refugee camp that was set up in 1975. The Sahrawi people were then the Polisario, who represent the Sahrawi people. They are the official representation as recognized by both the African Union, the United Nations, and the Polisario and Morocco went into a ceasefire agreement in September of 1991. And that ceasefire agreement saw MINURSO, which is the mission for a referendum of Western Sahara, being set up in Western Sahara by the United Nations. And the first mandate of MINURSO was to set up a referendum within 6 months of that ceasefire agreement. Almost 30 years later, the ceasefire agreement has now been broken, but that referendum has never seen the light of day. So the Sahrawi people have sat for 30 years and they have tried to do everything by the book. They have tried to sit around tables, negotiate, work with international law, work within the framework of the rule of law, and to try to ensure that their right, their inalienable right to self-determination is received, and that they have the right to a referendum which allows them to choose who they are and where they belong. And Morocco has aggravated that process ever since.
All right, thank you for that. We were speaking earlier on, and I think that our audience can relate. Those who know Lebanon, those who know Jordan, know that when the Nakba happened in Palestine in 1948, a lot of Palestinians left Palestine to go to neighboring countries. They still live there. They're still refugee camps even to this day. So those kind of analogies are very important for us and our audience. So as we were speaking earlier on that, the problem in Western Sahara is not the Sahrawi people. The problem in Western Sahara is not the people of Morocco. The problem in Western Sahara is the regime of Morocco. So just tell us about this particular regime. What is so problematic about the Moroccan regime since 1975 to this day in that particular area?
So the very important point, and a point I want to reiterate, because what we must never forget is I am not anti, and I share this because I said it to you earlier as well, and I share it for our audience. I'm not against or anti-Moroccans. I'm anti the regime. And the regime, because not only have they gone and occupied Western Sahara, not only do they trade in the natural resources of Western Sahara illegally against the International Court of Justice, against European Union judgments. They are not allowed to trade the natural resources of Western Sahara, yet they still do so. They are also colonizing Western Sahara. So there is a track record of years where they have brought Moroccans in and given them stipends, wonderful, wonderful incentives to move into Western Sahara, to populate Western Sahara's territory, so that eventually, when the referendum happens and when the United Nations eventually follows through with the referendum, Western Sahara is more Moroccan than it is Sahrawi. And these are all of the basic things. But when you go down and you really listen to the people and you really talk to Sahrawi people and you listen to what the Moroccan regime does, the violation of human rights. MINURSO not only failed on the referendum, but MINURSO is the only peacekeeping mission in the world that does not monitor human rights. How is it that this can be allowed? This is a failure of not only MINURSO, but a failure on the United Nations, on the Security Council and the Human Rights Council. So the violation of human rights on a daily basis is rife. The journalists, the civil society that speak out, they are tormented, they are tortured, They are violated. They are harassed constantly by the police, by the military, by the Moroccan secret police. And these are the kinds of things that they constantly do, not just now, but for the things that have been happening since 1975, since the occupation. And you speak to children, you speak to young people who went through schooling in Western Sahara under occupation, and they will tell you stories of they would go to school with their Sahrawi name, and they would then be told that they cannot have that name. They need to have a Moroccan. They cannot speak with a Sahrawi accent. They need to learn to speak with a Moroccan. With a Moroccan, they speak with besides French, they must with their own mother tongue. These are things that have now started to destroy the social fabric, the cultural fabric of the people of Western Sahara. And it continues to create huge divides. They are a very scared nation. They go home and they lock themselves away in their homes because of fear of the occupation and the occupying. However, you then have the Sahrawis who are living in the refugee camps in southwest Algeria. Even though they are very far away from their homes, they are not living under occupation. So the freedom and their movement is still what it was prior to 1975, when they were free to roam, to live their lives, to live their cultural way of life. And so you start to see a division between those in the occupied territory and those in the refugee camps. But the occupation and what is happening on the ground on a daily basis, the violation of human rights, the political prisoners who have been kept in jails and are not kept in jails in Western Sahara, they are taken back up to Morocco so that their families can't visit them, because the land and the space is so vast that their families cannot afford to travel to Morocco to see them. And those that do will then arrive at the jail after traveling many, many days, after having to sell all their belongings to get to see their family member. They then get to the jail only to be told, oh, I'm so sorry, that political prisoner was moved 2 days ago. You know, those kinds of things torment a mind. And lastly, sorry, I have to just say this. There are many stories, there are many examples of unbelievable Sahrawi freedom fighters who have been tortured. Morocco sits as a signatory to the anti-torture declaration. Yet, there are people being tortured to this day, not just once, not just for a day, not just for a week, for years on end. There are examples, Al-Ghalia Jimmy, people who have been tortured for 12 years at a time, taken from their families and tortured, something inhumane that I get goosebumps, and it is inhumane what is being done by that regime.
And you speak about prisoners taken into Morocco, which is legally in international law. One is reminded of Robben Island, where political prisoners were kept far away from society and isolated. I just want to speak shortly about the kind of regime that operates in Morocco, even from Morocco. You did touch on media the freedom of association, as well. Moroccans are not allowed to associate Sahrawi people. So the regime is not only oppressing the Sahrawi people, the regime is oppressing Moroccans.
Absolutely. Thank you for reminding me of that. Very important. It is also oppressing the Moroccans. You speak to people who live in Morocco as outsiders and who get the opportunity to go there to live. People who have traveled the length and breadth of Morocco and Western Sahara. And you hear of the extreme poverty of the Moroccan people. You hear of the unfortunate, they do not have freedom of speech. They do not have freedom of association. These are very important things. We need to understand that this regime is not just targeting Sahrawi people deliberately. The offset is that the Moroccan people themselves are also a target of a regime that is not there to serve the people. It is there to serve the regime and the kingdom. And so a few benefits from the sales of the natural resources, that is not going to really infiltrate the area where the resource comes from. It is going to feed the pockets and line the pockets of the regime. And it's really important for us to understand that Moroccans are also on the back end of the stick. And it's a very sad situation because they really, really suffer.
And the regime is the kingdom of King Mohammed is living lavish.
Absolutely. You see him having, prior to COVID, international holiday sprees, shopping sprees. He's wearing, he's kitted out in designer labels I've never even heard of. They are, and I probably never ever even know where to find them. It is unbelievable. And all of this is available online. What we don't know is what we don't. So we don't go and search what kind of life does the king live. We don't know that he's actually spending a lot of time in Europe, France specifically. He is shopping with his family, his wife, his children. He is really living the high life while his people suffer, while the Sahrawi people continue to beg for a referendum that is owed to them. So we must remember everyone is on the losing end of this story.
Yes, I think that's very important for audience to realize this. I think and also to point out that Muhammad is a dictator, you know.
Yes.
He's a dictator. His family has been ruling Morocco for years now. I think it's important for audience to know that. And I don't think it's a problem unique to Africa, but it's something unique to our presence. Our presence living lavishly off of the citizens, and we see this with recently what they call the Abrahamic Accords or whatsoever, the romantic and holy romantic relationship they want to have. But it's dictators in different countries collaborating with Israel, and for us that's the character of dictators. That's the character of modern day monarchs. Moving right along, you've been to Western Sahara a couple of times. So as a South African who comes from Johannesburg, who's living in a democracy, who has rights, what has been your experience in the refugee camps, in the desert of Western Sahara, where people have very little to eat in terms of variety, very little to drink, very little freedom of movement? What has been your experience when you have visited that country?
So, firstly, I must share, I have not been to the occupied territory before I'm allowed to travel to Morocco. So, for the past 7 or 8 years, I traveled to the Sahrawi refugee camps in southwest Bulgaria, constantly. As soon as I've said it's planning to go, I constantly go back. The Sahrawis there are living in the middle of unlivable land. The Sahara Desert is very rich. So the Sahrawis in the refugee camps are living in absolutely unlivable land from a climatic perspective. From a resource perspective, there is none. Their water comes in by truck. Their food is dropped by air. They get 7 ingredients in their food basket and have had 7 ingredients for 45 years. And so the nutrition deficiencies are huge. And they are living a life where they cannot modernize and advance themselves because then aid will be cut off. So they live on a double-edged sword. When the World Food Programme then says to them 2 years ago, I think we're going to have to give you half the food ration you get, they said, we don't all eat, none of us eat.
Just holiday, Catherine, we have to pay our bills.
Let's pay the bills. Let's pay the bills.
We'll be going to ad break in just a moment.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media, your humanitarian broadcaster.
Freedom Stationery supply Marlin and Marlin Kids pens to me and my school friends. They supply just about everything we need to help us get a better education, from books to files to rulers. In fact, any any accessory we need. Freedom Stationery. Education for the nation. What does accessory mean?
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness. And every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and free zakat calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, yet many children go to school hungry because of poverty. Penny Appeal's Breakfast Club aim to get a warm, hearty meal to underprivileged children so they can spend the day prospering in their schoolwork. Help feed a needy learner by visiting our website on www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573 to find out how you can donate. Penny Appeal. Small change, big difference.
Enduran Boys College is an independent boarding and day school situated on the N1 highway in Polokwane. We encourage intellectual and emotional development through a holistic learning environment. We follow the NCS CAPS curriculum and house boys from grade 6 to 12. We have boarding facilities also available from grade 6 to 12. Enduran Colleges aspires towards being a premier institution of learning by offering quality and value-based education that aims to serve humanity. Enduran College is safe haven and a home away from home. It's registered with the Department of Education and Umalusi accredited. For more information, contact us on 078 452 6264 or follow us on Facebook or Instagram or email us on polokwane@endurancolleges.co.za.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
Osman's Taj Mahal Spice and Rice. For over 80 years, Osman's Taj Mahal have been perfecting the art of the perfect blend of spices, pure, aromatic, and well-seasoned. Spices to tantalize your taste buds. From creative cuisines to gastronomical gourmet goodies. From exotic odors to traditional dishes, Osman's Taj Mahal have remained synonymous with quality spices and condiments. Taj Mahal rice, beans, and lentils. Try our range of chili bite mixes, rose and ilachi syrup, our quick and easy biryani pack, and our traditional range of spice blends. Osman's Taj Mahal. There is no substitute for quality.
An act of love saves lives. Sponsor an orphan with Islamic Relief, and you can help one of the 140 million children who have lost one or both parents through conflict, disaster, poverty, or disease. At Islamic Relief, we support over 60,000 orphans, and we need your help to nurture more children. Your love matters. Sponsor an orphan today. Visit www.islamic-relief.org.za.
Duzimed Medicine Depot Retail Pharmacy and Emergency Medical Depot, conveniently situated in the Duzimed Medical Center, Corner Burger and Bosser Street, Pietermaritzburg. We provide safe, affordable, and convenient medical facilities, open till 10 p.m. every day of the year. We have a full-house clinic that operates from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m., which is run by a qualified sister. The clinic offers immunization, vaccination, wellness, general consultation, and more. Call Duzimed Medicine Depot on 033 3421 Duzimed Medicine Depot, your pharmacy of choice.
It's a new beginning. It's a new era. Salam Media.
inside of the tents and the homes. We are also exposed to a people who have no access to resources. Water comes in by truck every few weeks. That water is kept in a lilo outside of each person's dwelling or home. That water in that plastic, in that beating hot sun, is then not good drinking water. It is not safe, clean drinking water. If you as an outsider go and drink that water, you will get sick. However, they have become used to that water because it's all that they have. Their food, their nutrition is limited because they are so isolated and so far away from everything. They do operate as a state in exile. So there's an entire democratic system that operates in those refugee camps, which is really very unique and is quite remarkable. The other thing to say is that the Sahrawi people are a Muslim nation, and the women are extremely powerful. And in fact, it is the women who run those refugee camps and really lead the charge of ensuring that everything works. And that stems from when the war broke out in 1975. Many women fled, and the men fought the war at that time. There were a huge population of women that also fought in that war, and it is well documented. However, women were forced to set up those refugee camps from the word go. And so they remain the stronghold within the society from that perspective. And in fact, they play a crucial role within the Sahrawi collective as to, setting things up, making sure those structures happen. The camps, there are 5 different refugee camps. The life there is a very different one. And I feel privileged to live in those refugee camps. And I say that because I constantly learn from the Sahrawi people. My family and my children that are there, my 4 children, are absolutely unbelievable. They teach me about what really is important in life. These are children that have less than nothing. We have a dire situation in our country where inequality is at all-time horrific levels and should never be seen by any humanity group anywhere in the world. However, here is a people that have less than nothing. So the remnants of war, broken vehicles, old war-torn tanks that live in the desert, those are their playgrounds. Those are their jungle gyms. They climb them and crawl into them and jump all over them. They run after the sunset and they navigate their way through the night by following the moon. They are absolutely remarkable people. They learn things that we have forgotten as a human race. But the Sahrawi people live a life where they are torn, because if they start to develop themselves and allow an economic boom within those refugee camps so that they're able to get more, be more, do more, their aid will be cut. And so it's a very sick dichotomy here where they sit on a double-edged sword. They cannot develop because then their food will be cut or their aid will be cut. And that aid is so little in comparison to what is actually required and what they should be getting. And they live on so little as it is. So I'm always humbled with the opportunity and privilege to stay in those refugee camps. And I must tell you, 8 years on, I never ever in my life thought I would have withdrawal symptoms from a refugee camp. But this lockdown has taught me that I do. I miss my families, my Sahrawi people, my children there so much. And it's been very difficult and very challenging. There's no sanitation facilities. There are no toilets. They have a telecom setup that has only happened in recent years. So many have cell phones to communicate with each other. But my greatest work has been to inspire them to share with the world what is happening. They have this device, but they don't always know what ability they have, the power that they have. And so to be able to share that with them when I'm there is an immense privilege, because the stories of both the camps, the stories of the occupation, and the stories where you sit and you speak with old women who arrived in the camp as old women who had already had a life. 40 years on, they're still now living in a refugee camp, and they carry a small picture of their loved one that they left behind, hoping that one day they're going to still see them again. A small picture that comes out of their pocket that has been stuck together 5-10 times. You realize that war is a horrific thing. You realize that occupation and forgotten people is something that should never happen in our lifetime.
And this goes to show us how occupation dehumanizes people. We know from the Gaza Strip that Israel controls everything that gets into the Gaza Strip through air, through sea, through land, and people get so dehumanized. They can't, like in Western, in refugee camps and the occupied territories, they can't get a particular education that you and I can get. They can't watch the news as me and you can watch the news just now. So occupation really does dehumanize us, and those of us who have the freedoms, we can see that others really don't. And it's not that we take them for granted, but because of occupation, other people really don't have these particular privileges. The lack of electricity, the lack of water. So where do you think Western the Sahrawi people find the strength to wake up to face another day, to speak their own indigenous language, as a form of resistance? Where do you think they get this particular spirit of resistance?
I often reflect on the strength of the Sahrawi people, often. And I had the privilege of being very close to Uncle Kathy, Ahmed Katrada. And I remember many stories that he would share with me about his time in prison, where they found the strength to also carry on. And you can draw such important parallels, because if you think of what our people went through during the darkest days of apartheid, and you think of how did they carry on, if you actually listen to what they had to go through, how did they fight, how did they carry on, you realize that the triumph of the human spirit is something far greater than we can possibly imagine, but it exists. And it's something very deep within. That bravery and courage that exists in the Sahrawi people, I know exists in the freedom fighters whose shoulders we stand on as a nation, those that gave their lives to fight for a freedom that we do take for granted today. It's nice to think we don't, but we don't appreciate the freedom we have. And I think it's only when you go outside and you realize what other people, the conditions that other people live in, you realize how much we should be grateful for. And I often think of, I mentioned Al Ghalia Jimmy. I think of Omaima in Geneva, who fights every single day as a diplomatic Sahrawi. I think of so many Sahrawis the world over that I've been privileged to work with. And when you listen to their stories, I think to myself, why do they even bother? Why do they still get up? Where do they find the strength? When there are two, there are in fact three gentlemen I want to quickly just mention. Hamdi, who is in the refugees currently, Hassana Abba, Hassana Alia, and Ali Rubio. Ali Rubio is in Europe, and Hassana, both the Hassanas are also in Europe. You listen to their stories and you listen to what they tell you, and you think to yourself, where do they find the strength to be human? When you have been dehumanized the way that the Moroccan regime has dehumanized Sahrawi people, where do they find the strength to carry on? Hassana Abba, the very first time I met him, after spending 2 weeks at the Human Rights Commission with him, and I said goodbye to him, I said to him, I'll probably see you in the next session, etc. He turned around and he said to me, no, he never knows that he'll see anybody again, because he knows when he goes home, they will look for him and they will beat him. And he showed me pictures of when they beat him. You can never tell it's the same person. In fact, his body is as dark blue as the walls behind us. His face is beaten up so badly that you can't see where his eyes are and where his nose is. His face is so disfigured from the brutal violation of him as a human being. And this is something that is ongoing. Because they can't put him in jail, they beat him up. They go and they look for him and they beat him up in a way that he needs weeks to recover. The regime dehumanizes people because it has taken their dignity and their value of life. It has made them question who they are, and it has not allowed them to be who they are and who they choose to be. And this is really, I think this is another trait of dictatorship, of a regime such as this. But the horrific violation of human rights, I cannot drive that home enough. There is a woman who was in prison by the Moroccan regime. She was taken with her baby, and she was tied up in a concrete cell with her baby in the other corner. And she had to listen to that baby scream itself to death. She was then hung up by her hair every single day. They then tortured her. That was not her torture. How does that woman get up every day now, after being released from such malicious, evil darkness. And she still fights. She fights for her people. That is the strength of the human spirit. And we can never forget those stories. And there are many of them in our own country, in Palestine, in Western Sahara. Those are the people that should be the heroes of our society and the heroes of humanity.
We had in South Africa Ambassador from Western Sahara, Ambassador Bachiri, passed away last year. May his soul rest in peace. Ambassador Bachiri came with very interesting stories, Catherine. He was he was a soldier in the armed struggle of the Western Sahara, in the Polisario as well, was a high-ranking official. And interesting enough, in the 1980s, he said, Owar Tambo was here. He came here at some point, and we trained guerrillas of the ANC in the desert. It was too hot. Tambo couldn't. Owar Tambo couldn't handle it, and he left. Excuse me. And he was very fond of South Africans, and this is because he knew us during our struggle. He didn't know us post our struggle. And then he loved the country very much, but he would tell these stories that South Africa, my brothers and sisters, he liked telling a story of how they tried to use the border of Botswana to come in the country, and how they would steal tanks of the apartheid regime to fight in the desert. And those are stories that comfort us, that during our own struggle, there were people that were having their own struggle, but they helped us in that struggle. So what would you say are the parallels between our own struggle against apartheid, a very evil regime? We know that apartheid was a crime against humanity. What are those parallels that you can draw between our own struggle against apartheid and what the Western Sahara people are going through right now?
I think this is also really very important, and you bring up important things. I was often I go and I visit the Museum of Resistance in the refugee camps, where many of these South African tanks still are today. And I love that story because what in fact transpired, and just to kind of add to what you've just shared, is that the apartheid government sold arms to the Moroccan government. Those arms were then taken by the guerrilla forces of the Polisario, and they were gifted back to the ANC, and it is said that many of those arms, the tanks, were used in Angola to fight the war. The ANC fought there, and
the Battle of Kutukunavari.
Yes. And so it is such a wonderful story of two liberation movements who walked a journey. Mandela told the Sahrawi people when he did visit, and when he was there, and when he spoke with...
Just to interject, I really forgot. It's really important for our audience to know Mandela visited Western Sahara.
Yes.
He was trained in the desert of Algeria.
Absolutely.
In armed combat.
Yes.
So the Mandela that you know today, the Mandela, the noble statements, no. He was being trained by the armed guerrilla forces of Western Sahara.
Absolutely. Thank you. This is very important. And the Polisario had a very strong relationship and a very strong tie to the Sahrawi people, to the Polisario, the ANC, and the Sahrawi were very close. Many of our militants were trained there in Algeria. And there are many stories of people who trained with them, who trained them, etc. And it's wonderful. But when Mandela was there, he said, with our liberation and our freedom, the Sahrawi people will receive their freedom too. Unfortunately, we have not yet made that dream a reality for him, but we must and we will. And the struggle that they have walked, the journey they have walked together as two liberation movements, we can continue to see these parallels. We continue to see the similarities of what the ANC went through, where you have to, you send your people out. There are people that have to live in the diaspora within the diplomatic space to be sharing and educating people, etc. The one thing that I would want to, there are so many parallels, and we could talk for hours just on that, but I want to show something that is a difference and something that we have not got yet right with the Western Sahara. And that is a global groundswell of education and awareness, because the ANC was well known the world over. There were solidarity movements with the struggle against apartheid all over the world. We saw people who would march and who would protest and make demonstrations in small cities to large cities. Trafalgar Square, that the one in London sticks out in my head because that's such a prominent city. But what we don't yet have is a groundswell of people who know the struggle and conflict of Western Sahara, and those that go out and in many parts of the world where we see demonstrations taking place, majority of them are Sahrawis who are the groundswell of people just living outside of the occupied territory or outside of the refugee camps. And so we really require a lot more understanding between what those similarities are in order to close the gap of where there is a vast difference on these two liberation struggles and these two liberation movements. And the work that is done by the Polisario around the world by their diplomats, young and old, is phenomenal. And I really salute those young diplomats who work day and night to fight for a struggle that the world has not yet recognized.
Yes, and I think you're right on the anti-apartheid struggle. I remember the Free Mandela concert, one of the biggest in the time. And I think it's the South African government, many other governments in the continent, this should be basic historical curricula in schools about the plight of the Sahrawi people.
Yes.
And Ambassador Bachir was telling us that some of the guerrillas that they trained were generals in South African Defense Force, you know. And these are some of the give and take in terms of struggle. Like, you got your freedom, help me get mine arrangement. We're not saying the South African government must feel shame, but there must be some level of responsibility on the government today that we were helped and we should help others.
This is so important. You know, it's one thing to have this good policy, which we have. We have probably, after Algeria, the best policy in the world on Western Sahara. Our recognition of the Sahrawi people, the state of Western Sahara. It's paramount. But we need a different kind of action because that policy lives on paper. I want to see us being more vocal. I want to see us making sure that everybody knows. You know, we must never forget how Africa opened its arms to us. The stories of what happened in Zambia, in Nigeria, when they opened their arms to our freedom fighters who seeked refuge in those countries while they worked underground. We cannot forget those stories. What are we doing to be the same Africans to our brothers and sisters of Western Sahara? And this for me is a huge, huge problem because as a South African, I know what we went through and I know what other countries did for us, what individuals did for other individuals the world over. And I'm constantly reminded of people in different places. I was in Colombia, in Bogota, and the mayor of Bogota came to me and she said, as a young student at Harvard, she arranged a protest because she heard about what was happening in South Africa. That she's so far away from South Africa, has no contact, no connection to South Africa or a South African. She's never, I think I was the first South African she actually ever met. And this is 30, 40 years later, after she stood in front of her university and protested. What are we doing to show our solidarity in meaningful ways that are impactful for the people of Western Sahara? Not just a policy document that reads very nice and says very powerful things. What is the action on the ground that we're doing and showing to the world?
Interesting, you should say that. I think for our South African audience and our Nigerian audience as well, and I'll just add for other African countries, the most interesting part about the anti-apartheid movement was that Oliver Tambo and others really had no resources to lead the anti-apartheid movement because it was an anti-apartheid movement that mobilized global action for South Africa. So they needed money, basically. And the government of Nigeria, South Africans, the government of Nigeria instituted a public servant tax, a tax that would go towards the ANC. So public servants, all of public servants in Nigeria didn't have a choice. You had to pay a certain money from your salary at the end of the month that will go towards the ANC in fighting the struggle. The same was happening in Sweden, in other parts of the world. The ANC had headquarters in Zambia. The ANC had headquarters in Tanzania. The ANC was in Mozambique. The ANC was in the Congo. Angola, sorry. So these are practical examples to say we can point out that here, African countries did something practical. And it just leads me to my question that what should be done to our audience sitting at home, to a government employee, to a politician watching now, what should be done as a student at, let's say, Wits University? What can I do? What should be done on this particular question?
I think this I'm very excited to unpack and kind of end off with, because that is the most important question. Firstly, the most important thing for anyone who's watching us tonight and sharing in on this, even if you're catching this as a package afterwards and you're watching this on Sunday afternoon and you're sitting at home, I want you to pick up your phone. I don't want you to just have listened to what we've said. I want you to go and Google and go and educate yourself. Go and find information on Western Sahara. I want you to then understand that there is a greater conflict at play here that you had no idea about. I want you to use the platforms you have. We have social media now that is more powerful than ever before. Social media that our ANC veterans and freedom fighters never had the power of social media and technology the way that we do. So we can use our voice for good. We can use our platform to educate others. Find one article on Western Sahara, share it. Share it on your platforms. Share this broadcast today on your platforms. Educate your circle. I would say if you're at a university or if you're a student, if you're sitting at home, if you're a public servant, it doesn't matter where you are. Start to ask the question. When you hear about Western Sahara, start to interrogate. Ask people, ask your direct leadership in whatever frameworks it is. It might be in a university council, it could be in a parastatal you work with, it could be at a government institution you work with. What is our stance on Western Sahara and what are we doing to help those people? Perhaps there's a program you can do. Perhaps there's something you can do just to educate and create awareness amongst your peers and your comrades within the space where you work, in your family. Bring it up when you go out for lunch, when you're having a braai with your family, whatever it might be. Bring up Western Sahara. It's the big white elephant in the room that no one wants to speak of. I go to diplomatic functions and people see me and they will walk to the other far corner because they are so scared I'm going to say Western Sahara. That's what we want. People must be uncomfortable. Educate yourself. Educate those around you and start sharing credible content on Western Sahara. I try to share content all day, every day, across my social media platforms on the issue of Western Sahara, on things that are going on, things that have happened, opinion pieces. Follow at Change Agent SA on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You'll find me. Facebook, you'll find me under my name. It's the only one that let me use my whole name. So that's Catherine Constantinides. Educate yourself. Listen to the stories of other Sahrawi people. They're there. They're on those platforms. You can find those stories. I would also ask you, if you sit in any political structures, start to ask the hard questions of your political parties. We need stronger voices across political parties to stand up for Western Sahara, to stand up for the referendum that was promised to the Sahrawi people that has still not taken place. There is a violation of human rights. There is certainly a crime against humanity that is taking place in Western Sahara. This is an occupied territory. Surely, I am sure that the majority of the audience that you capture is a younger audience. And I want to really want to appeal to you to say, how is it that when we have access to platforms, technology, we have access to connecting with each other in a way that no other generation has had before? How can we not bring this to the attention of the people we're connected with? We have an immense responsibility, first and foremost, to create awareness and educate people on Western Sahara. We then need to create uncomfortable situations where we have the dialogue and discussion. It can be a debate, that's fine. But we have to start bringing Western Sahara onto our agenda as a matter of importance and urgency. The Sahrawi people are suffering, those in the occupied territory and those in the refugee camps. It cannot be that in our lifetime, an occupation of this nature is happening on our continent and we're not giving it the attention it deserves. The African Union has failed us as a people of this continent because Western Sahara is still under occupation and colonization. It is the last colony in Africa. And in our lifetime, that must change. And there is no doubt about that. We need every individual to give their individual voice so that as a collective, we are louder, we are stronger. And platforms such as yourself, I just want to say thank you to you, Ali, and to you and your organization, Africa for Palestine. The fact that you have lent this platform to the Sahrawi people, I thank you. I thank you because, as I said to you earlier, the Sahrawi people are my people. They are my second nation. And so we require that kind of solidarity. We need solidarity with the people of Western Sahara. There's an international solidarity campaign that lives on social media with the hashtag Stand in the Sand. This was put together by NGOs in the occupied territory, NGOs in the refugee camps, where they wanted something where somebody who is sitting in Mongolia and wants to share their solidarity could put a message on social media and use that hashtag. Because the reality is not everyone, well now no one can go to the refugee camps, we cannot go to the occupied territory. But a Sahrawi who wakes up, you know, I was in Spain, in Madrid, at a meeting with the Polisario and with a massive group of Sahrawis. And a girl came and sat next to me and she said to me, I was sitting in Lesotho and I had to go through a few days of meetings, and I couldn't find a way to get up that morning. I couldn't find strength to do what I had to do as a young freedom fighter. And I went onto social media and I looked for that hashtag and I looked at the messages of support, and I was able to fuel through what I needed to do. And when I think of that story of a young girl that I will probably never ever meet again, but she goes and she looks for that hashtag and looks for those messages of solidarity, that gives her strength. Imagine if that's such a simple thing that we can do for people who are fighting for their self-determination to just be who they are. We have an immense responsibility to do all that we can for the people of Western Sahara.
Great. So if you're a member of a book club, tell them at your book club. If you're a member of a burial society, tell them at your burial. Yes. Wherever you are, bring out the issue of Palestine. Of Western Sahara. As we bring out the issue of Palestine, Swaziland, Venezuela, and other Iran and other oppressed areas of the world, bring up the issue of Western Sahara. Just shortly, we have about 2 minutes left. Just shortly touch on, and I know we should have done this, just touch on the inability of international bodies like the United Nations and the African Union to deal with this particular issue.
Absolutely. So let me just say that the United Nations and the African Union have failed the people of Western Sahara. Unequivocally, let us not be confused. The fact that a ceasefire agreement has been in place for 30 years and no political arrangement has been able to be agreed upon in order for the Sahrawi people to reach their self-determination as a nation is an absolute failure. MINURSO has not monitored the human rights violations taking place in Western Sahara, a failure. MINURSO has not is dead. It could not organize a referendum. It has not been able to keep the ceasefire agreement, which has now failed, and they've gone back into armed conflicts. So it has failed the people. The UN has failed its own charter to stand by its own principles. The African Union allowed Morocco back into the African Union 3-4 years ago with no terms and conditions, yet allowing Morocco back in as an occupying power, as a colonizer on the continent, goes against the preamble of the African Union Declaration itself. So we have failed. And it is no good just to look at the international community that has failed us. Our own African leaders have failed the people of Western Sahara, and we must hold them accountable.
Thank you very much. We are about to get the end of our show. So if you have a local councillor, a local congressman, or a local government official, tell them that they are failing the people of Western Sahara. And those are the voices that we need. I thank you, Catherine, for joining us. This particular episode will be on our Facebook page and Salam Media Facebook page. It will remain there. It will be on a YouTube channel, Africa for Palestine. It's going to be there. We're going to put the link on Twitter as well. And you can find Catherine on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Change Agent SA. That's Change Agent SA. And then you can ask follow-up question on this one. I know she's very active. She might follow you as well. And follow us on Twitter, Africa for Pal, on Facebook, or Africa for Palestine, on Instagram, we are Africa for Palestine. Thank you very much, Catherine. And we will see a free and liberated Western Sahara in our lifetime.
In our lifetime, we will. Thank you so much, and thank you for the privilege of this opportunity to share with you tonight. Just up there.
Thank you to Salam Media as well, and good night and hope.